Slopes tent. Thank you. This is Tempest for the Casual Election Hacker, starting in a few minutes. If you wanted to go to the talk, Relaunch Bits of Freedom, that has been moved to track number 3 in the 2 envelopes tent. Good afternoon, everybody. This talk is Tempest for the Casual Election Hacker by Andreas Bolk. He got the chance to do an analysis of the electromagnetic radiation from an election machine, and he's here to present his results. Thank you, and enjoy the talk.
Okay. You can hear me all? Fine. I'm going to talk about Tempest today, obviously. So what's Tempest? Tempest is a play by William Shakespeare, and it deals with a magician who uses his powers to invoke a big storm, a tempest. And it's a comedy or a romance, but no, that's not entirely what I'm going to talk about. So let's try it again. Why are we doing this? Maybe the other angle. You probably all know about voting computers. It was a big issue in many countries. It still is an issue in some countries, like Austria, for instance, and I think also in the US. People still have voting machines. Oh, turn up the volume. I thought I had a mic. Okay, so we don't trust voting computers is essentially why we are doing this, because we think that it's way too easy to cheat and do nasty things in electronic elections. We think voting computers are evil because, as you know, it's pretty easy to tell the difference between a voting machine and a cheating voting machine. You see the pristine one on the left and the modified one on the right, which essentially means you can't. And back in 2006, voting computers were a big issue because the Dutch hackers around the We Don't Trust Them Computers organization and the German CCC people got together and attempted to show that voting machines can be manipulated. Because you always had the claims, well, you cannot do that without the source code. And it's not a computer, it's a machine, and nothing can happen there. And so we got our hands on some of the Dutch NADAP voting machines and played around with them, like reversed the firmware, exported a list of symbols, converted that to a linker script, which allowed us to, link arbitrary C code against the original binary, and do pretty nasty stuff with it, like cheating in the election or playing chess. And one of the attack vectors we thought of back then was, of course, electromagnetic radiation. And the equipment we had wasn't too good. It's basically we had a radio scanner, and we had a pretty old spectrum analyzer. But using that, we found emanations of the voting computer, and we found the special character issue with the display, which you might have heard about it or not. And I'm going to demonstrate that, because is that cable long enough? It almost is. Okay, so what you can do when you place a radio scanner near the device and tune it to the right frequency is that you hear a specific emission. What the fuck? Can I have a real power supply, please? Okay, here we go. It's not very good to hear, is it? Do you hear that non-noise in it? Like it goes away if I move the antenna. It goes away if I move the power, of course. Okay. Hear that? Still hear it? Hear it even better? Can I have an assistant, please? Volunteer? You hold that?
Yes.
No, you have to vote because I have the microphone.
Vote.
Yeah. And choose between the party on the left and the party second to left. Yeah? And then the one next to it, and the one to the right. Okay, party on the left. Party in the middle. Party on the left. Doesn't work anymore. If you have to press the button on the left, upper left, to okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that. Okay. Fuck, I had the power. I just pulled it off. Let's make that professional. I really hate live demonstrations of analog stuff. It's always not working. Okay, so that's what we found out back then. That's what we published, and you might have seen the movie online with the TomTom device showing whether you voted conservative or not. Basically, it was based on that attack. You had a radio scanner, very simple scanner, and a frequency counter, and that was basically it. So, But we were in Germany, and we didn't have to fight the Dutch authorities, we had to fight the German authorities. And in Germany, the voting machines were certified by the Physikalisch-Technische Bundesanstalt, PTB. And they were the guys basically responsible for checking that everything's okay. Like, reading the source code, and making sure that the things behave like they should. And after we came up with our results, and we published the results, they kept saying, no, the enabled machines, the German ones are different, and they don't have any electromagnetic radiation. Yeah, sure. And the interesting thing is the Dutch authority for checking voting computers, the TNO, they had a list of differences between the Dutch machine and the German machine, because the German machines were usable for Dutch elections. And that list was very short, and it said things like the stem knob is green and not red, and et cetera, so small things. Nothing really that said anything about extra tempest shielding or something. So we couldn't verify it back then. So it was left in the open. But we wrote a report based on what we learned by playing with the machine, and that was presented to the German Supreme Court, the Bundesverfassungsgericht. And those are really wise guys. They essentially ruled that it's totally, perfectly okay to use voting computers as long as your grandma can verify that every vote was counted correctly. In other words, you can't. That's okay. So basically, we got rid of the problem for now. They attempt to come back with things like adding a paper trail to the machine and stupid things. And there are also other countries that still use voting machines, and this was a left open issue. And this year, we got an offer from a small village near Berlin that we could perform some measurements with their voting computers. And we picked it up. So now we're again at the Tempest topic. So what's Tempest? It's not an acronym for something, even if some people claim that. It's a code name of an NSA project that dealt with electromagnetic emanation. And it's been known to exist as a phenomenon at least since the 40s. The NSA project started in the 60s, so that's all very, very old stuff. And the first publication about Tempest was by Wim van Eck in 1985. That's why Tempest is also known as Van Eck radiation. What he described, though, was electromagnetic radiation from an analog monitor. And that's pretty easy to pick up. What you have to do is, monitor writes beam from left to right and up to down. You probably all know that. So you have a current running through the wire going through your CRT, where the current changes according to the lightness of the pixel, and that from left to right. And same for the actual beam in there. It generates a pretty strong field. And as we all know, the electromagnetic wave is proportional to the change in the field. I'm coming back to that later. So essentially what you do is you put a wet clothesline into the air and attach an amplifier, then put a capacitor there for integration, and then you generate vertical and horizontal sync artificially and put that onto a monitor again. And you just have, the moment where you hit the right horizontal and vertical frequencies, you see the analog monitor image on your next analog monitor. And for reasons that are entirely unclear to me, nobody until very recently published about digital Tempest. So the analog monitor thing, it has been demonstrated on the CCC, it has been demonstrated on DEF CON, pretty much public knowledge. But not many people talked about digital signals, which is interesting because you can commercially buy devices that do Tempest analysis for serial lines, for printers, off the shelf. The first publication I could find about digital emanations was from the year 2006 by two Chinese guys, and it was published at the robotics conference. Okay, it saved me from, trying to work out all the formulas myself. I attempted, but I'm not that good at math, but yeah, those guys are a bit better than me. So this is what they're writing about the general equation for the electromagnetic field, which, you don't have to understand it. I don't understand it either completely, but the interesting thing is that you have that I, which is a function of omega. That means the current in your wire is a function of here of the angular velocity, and so the electric and magnetic field is in proportional to the frequency of the signal. Now you can take the Fourier transformation of that to get the time domain signal strength. That's the electric field, magnetic field can derive from that, and so. The thing you need to understand is that here is a derivative. You have your I of some time variant signal, so the current running through your wire, that depends on the time, and you take the differential of that, and that's your electromagnetic wave, essentially. The interesting thing is when you think electromagnetic wave, you think about some oscillation and signals and sinus and everything, but we are in digital domain here because, this is not a CRT monitor on that device. That's why I'm thinking about digital signals. It's an LCD device, and LCD devices work by being driven by digital signals. You have rows and columns, and one row is driven at the same time. All the columns are driven or not, depending on whether you have a white or black pixel. So essentially what you see is emanation of from digital signals. And if you look at that, the derivative of a rectangular signal, as everybody knows, mathematicians says it's a singularity, it doesn't exist. The signal processing guys say it's a Dirac impulse, and mathematicians have worked long and hard to understand what a Dirac impulse actually is in mathematical terms, but it's convenient to use. And so if you look at the differential of a rectangular signal, that spikes. It spikes up, it spikes down. Now, when we have real-world lines that transfer current, they have a capacity and they have an inductance. So essentially, they form a low-pass filter. So in the real world, you get a signal like the one on the left. So on the left is the current running through our wire, and it changes from 0 to 1 and from 1 to 0. And you see the little ripples at the end, and you see that the edge has a slope. It's not directly vertical. So the energy of that is obviously limited. And to the right, you see the electromagnetic field generated by that, an idealized version. So of course you have transmission effects, etc., etc. But this is what to expect on the input of your receiver when you try to pick up digital signals. Now you can take that and do a frequency transformation on that. So if you take the FFT of a Dirac impulse, what you get is that it's spread across all frequencies. It's on all frequencies at the same time. But we have a signal that's essentially a bandwidth limited pulse, and this also spreads across all the spectrum, but in regular intervals where the signal strength goes up, then down again. So you get all those lobes depending on your position and depending on the specific conditions. So that's what I wanted to see. I was starting with the stuff I received at the radio scanner, and the new toy we have these days we didn't have back then is of course the USRP from the GNU Radio project, which is a high bandwidth receiver. And so I started to look for those patterns together with a couple of friends supporting me for the trip, and try to find signals. So these are the measurements we did with the German NEDAP. So the first thing we did was look at the baseband signal, so the frequency from 0 to 8 megahertz in this case, based on the assumption that maybe if you've seen the graph on that this one, you see that in theory, in most cases, on the lowest frequency, you have the highest energy. That's not always correct, though. If you look at the one at the bottom, there are conditions where the main lobe shifts further towards higher frequencies, which has to do with resonance frequencies of the wires, etc., etc. So we were first looking at the baseband signal. This is the background signal with the machine turned off. This is the same signal. Can we maybe turn off the lights here in the front that you see more on the projector? No? Where? Okay. We can. So if you look really careful, you see that between the base signal, the background noise, and the baseband with NIDAP turned on, there are some differences. You see frequencies coming into it, like those lines here, this line there. The antenna I was using for that was a magnetic loop antenna, and unfortunately the two thick lines you see there. Oh, by the way, who's never seen such a diagram, this is the frequency spectrum. Time runs from down to up, and the frequency runs here into the positive direction and here into negative direction. So if I give you a frequency later, that will be the center frequency. We are at the moment in the baseband where the center frequency is 0, so essentially the left is a mirror of the right. And the magnetic loop antenna is useful for low frequencies, but it generates this noise. So that's antenna noise. Okay, so there were a couple of lines that were coming into the spectrum, and I was zooming in a bit closer and didn't really see much. So these are the lines that appeared, but they're not very modulated. I didn't see a lot of information in that. So we played around a bit, and finally decided to actually try the frequencies we used in 2006 with the radio scanner. And yeah, that was a little bit more successful. If you look really closely, you can see here a band forming. This is the spectrum, and as you can see here, this is the noise level, and this is the signal, so it's almost there. So if you look really closely and maybe take a bit of mushrooms, you see the signal in there. And yeah, that was no good. So we played around with different antennas, and this is using actually this very antenna I'm using here that you're seeing there in the device at the moment. And that's better already. So we see this and that line over there is generated by the device, and that in the middle as well. Yeah, and again, distance now is a bit bigger, and the signal is still there. You see it on the left a bit, you see the spike, and you see maybe 5 decibels or so of signal strength. So, again, close to the device, and now we are starting to press buttons on the device. It's again very hard to see on the projector, but here in the upper region, this is where the display is empty. You see those lines there, and here in that area, the display is displaying content, and the noise you've heard, that's a refresh of the display. It refreshes itself every 13 milliseconds, 70 times per second. And in this area, you see maybe here and here and here and here a repetitive pattern. So, well, we see something. We see if we press a button, the display is blanked. We see that there are repeats in there. We tried a couple of other frequencies to confirm that the theory that we see the signal in regular intervals according to the theory. And actually we do. We see the signal in varying strength at multiples of 4 megahertz. So that's a measurement at 120 megahertz. You see again part of the signal here, see part of it here, and on the left side. Okay, and then we came home, and we're very proud to have those recordings and everything, and I was looking at the signal, and then found out that I had messed up, and we had sample drops in our recordings. So what we could do was give a quantitative analysis of the signal strength, which is pretty much the same as for the NADAP we tested in 2006. So if you walked away with the scanner, the distances were the same. But as you've seen, the pictures were a bit unclear because samples have been dropped, and I've also been unable to extract any meaningful differences between different LCD pictures in there. So we decided to call our Dutch friends again and ask them to get the NADAPs out of the closet and bring them here. And so I spent the day yesterday to recreate measurements and to see whether I can, whether actually there's a difference between the Dutch and the German, or whether it's the same, etc., etc. And that's what we see here. Now, the thing is, they brought two NADAPs. And also in Germany, there are two different models. It's the ESD1 and ESD2 that's allowed to be used. And we have here in refurbished, I think it says, where's the type sign? ES3B, and the B is written by hand. So it used to be an ES3A and has been refurbished. And there's another one which says ES3B, and the B is actually printed. So it's actually a new one. And I started doing measurements with the new one and noticed that the signal was a lot weaker than with the machine we have measured in Germany, and also a lot weaker than I remembered from the experiments in 2006. So this is the best result I could get from the new NADAP. And I think in this picture now, without the sample loss, you pretty much see the display refresh structure. You see it's a periodic signal, and this is where it does the refresh, and this is where it, the retrace, except that it doesn't retrace. And this is where the content is, and then the signal repeats. Introduction, signal, etc., etc., etc. And if you look at that, you see that you have maybe, so those lines are 20 dB. So your signal to noise ratio is, if you look at that here, maybe 20, maybe only 10 dB for really interesting stuff. So not very good. So we tried it again with the old NADAP, and that's a much better picture. You can actually see something in there. You see structure. And yeah, this was 256 kilohertz bandwidth. This was shot with 8 megahertz bandwidth. So what we saw in the last picture is only this very rich in energy stripe in the middle. And with the old machine, I didn't see anything in the side lobes here. No, with the new machine. And with the old machine, I really saw a lot. So that's 8 megahertz of bandwidth. That means we get 120,000 complex samples per refresh. And yeah, a lot better. And you can actually see it changed the display contents. This is same frequency, same machine, only the spectrum is a little more compressed. You see down here, the refresh you already know. So this is a refresh cycle. And what you see up here is the NADAP blanking its display and then sending new data to the display. And in other instances of it sending new data, it looks completely different. So same settings as this picture, just that the display change now happens here. It's a lot shorter. And I think you can actually see, that's where I basically stopped with analysis because I couldn't get any further. There are obviously two things you might want to attack here. So what you want to find out is what the guy in there is voting for, right? So what you can look at is either the screen contents during the refresh, which is the regular cycles down there, or you could look at the command that's being sent to the display controller, because there's a display controller right on the display, and You talk a serial protocol to it and send it data and say, oh, display character here, display character there, and it does it. And you might also be able to pick up this signal and just tell apart the different commands from each other. I tried a bit to run a classical correlation analysis on the refresh signal. Correlation means you take a snippet of a sample, which is your reference, then you slide it across the incoming, and then you look whether how good the match is by actually multiplying per sample your two signals and then summing it up. And this didn't work too well. I couldn't tell display contents apart. What you could also try in the next step is a correlation analysis on the incoming data to the display controller, which I didn't try yet, but that's the next steps. So how would you approach that? If you look at classical signal theory, the thing that's closest to our case is radars. So radars emit a series of regular pulses and look at the echo. So the problem is essentially the same. I have a reference signal, which in the case of NADAP is different display contents. In the case of the radar, it's the radar signal that's being sent. And then you get echoes back. And to improve the signal quality of the echoes, what they do in radar is integrating the signal. So they figure out where it starts and then sum it up. And if you do it 100 times, you get an improvement in signal quality. And you can do that both for the reference signal and for the incoming signal. The thing is that it's pretty tricky to actually find out where the signal starts, because in your receiver, you have an oscillator, and that oscillator is not in phase sync with the display in the machine you're attacking. So what happens is that every time the display sends its signal, your oscillator has a different phase. And you need to correct for that phase, because otherwise, if you keep integrating your signal, you will end up with a result that's pretty close to zero. So what you would need to do is sync on something in there, figure out the phase, and then use that for integration. And that's the next steps I'm planning. If you look at the signal, maybe where it's better visible. There are points in here where you can attempt to start your sync at, like here. That's where you want to sync on and find out the phase for integration. Okay, so that's the state of my research. I unfortunately cannot provide you with working software to tell you what the person voted for, but I'm quite confident that it's possible, given our measurements, at least with the old machines. With the new machines, you'd need I think more expensive hardware. And I would like to thank all the people who helped me in performing my experiments, and I hope that you found my results or lack of results in some points interesting. And I'll answer questions. Thank you.
Please ask questions at the central microphone.
Hi. I was wondering, you said you tried to integrate the signals, but why didn't you just use a longer correlation period, because you integrate at the same time then?
I tried to use longer correlation signals. One thing is that if you use regular correlation, your computational effort pretty fast goes through the roof, because it grows with the product of your sample rate and the size of the signal you're comparing. So that's one reason. The second reason is that even with the correlation, you have the phase problem. If you correlate out of phase, that's bad. You need phase reconstruction anyways, because simple correlation won't help enough. I tried to just look at the magnitude of the signal, and that didn't lead to proper results either.
instead of using the omnidirectional antenna, have you considered using a high gain directional, which would modify your signal's noise ratio?
I considered that, but I figured that in the end, the attack is only viable if I can do it from a distance. So if I put my omnidirectional antenna right next to the device, as you're seeing it here, and the signal isn't strong enough, there's no way that a directional antenna in 10 meters distance will help me any. So that's of course the answer to extending the range of the attack. It's better antennas, better amplifiers.
Well, Andreas, let's pretend you have another chance to have a German NADAP for, let's say, 4 hours. What would you expect to find? A German NADAP. Let's say we have another town in Germany which would provide us with a NADAP.
Well, what we can do then is do the measurements again to if we manage to write the attack that works for the Dutch NADAPs, we can then try to see whether it works for the German NADAPs as well. So I think I would do that. I have done some measurements now, and I would like to get that stuff working that does the detection of display contents, and then we go to German NADAP again. Okay, if there are no more questions, I think we have 15 minutes until the next talk. I'm going to set up the USRP reception stuff here, and if you want, you can come here and play around with it and have a look at the signal that's being emanated. Thank you.